What's going on, Packers fans? Happy Sunday. Welcome into an all-new episode of the Pack-A-Day Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can find the podcast at Pack-A-Day Podcast. Hope you are enjoying this offseason. We've got mini camps coming up this week, and that should be fun. Again, all three practices this week are currently scheduled to be open to the media. I'm expecting two of them to stay that way, one of them to be canceled for a team building activity, but we do get our last week of actual Packers stuff until we get about 5 to 6 weeks off, and then we actually jump right into training camp from there. Today, we're going to be jumping into how this Packers roster was actually built. This is a fun one to kind of put together. And there were some interesting just sort of trends, dynamics, and different ways of looking at this that were actually even a lot more fun than I was expecting as I was going into this episode. But I do think it is fun to see how Brian Gutekunst has utilized all these different avenues of adding free agents, of adding draft picks, of adding undrafted free agents, and every other avenue that there is to utilize in player acquisition to build this current 90-man roster. They do have one spot open with Alex Hale being an international pathway program player. We'll see if they fill that prior to minicamp this week. But as of right now, 90 players on the team. Before we get into that, just real quick, the only piece of news and notes that happened on Saturday was that Aaron Rodgers officially signed his deal with Pittsburgh. It was a one-year deal. It has incentives that can get him a little bit under $20 million this upcoming year. Did not get some crazy sort of like $60 million contract or anything like that. It was expected to be a one-year, $20 million deal. It actually became less than that. It's more like around 14 with some incentives that can get it to right around 20 million. Again, nothing unexpected here. Rodgers is a Pittsburgh Steeler. It's official. He's going to be at minicamp this week for Pittsburgh, and then he will speak to the media following that first minicamp practice on Tuesday. Some of you care a lot about that. Some of you care absolutely nothing about that. But like I said before, he is a Packers legend, and it will be interesting to see how Aaron does in Pittsburgh. And of course, the big thing there is that the Packers play the Steelers in week 8 of this upcoming season. All right, let's get into this roster, this 90-man roster, and specifically how it was built. I'm going to go in order of the most acquisitions to the least. And again, kind of review not only how it was built, but just kind of some interesting notes and tidbits within that. And then to see if there's areas of opportunity with how Brian Gutekunst can attack these different avenues moving forward. So we're going to start with 21 out of 90 players. 21 out of 90 players were added via this specific avenue. And I should note before this, I do have the draft separated into the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, counting is easy. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh rounds, and then undrafted free agency, all in separate tiers. So the draft in its entirety would obviously account for a huge portion of this, but when you consider that it's all different rounds that I'm taking into consideration here, that's why it's a little bit different. But without further ado, 21 out of the 90 Packers on the roster right now, 23.3% of the entire team were acquired via undrafted free agency. That is a huge chunk of players. Not super unexpected when you know how the Green Bay Packers go about attacking undrafted free agency and having all this success with having a undrafted free agent on the team almost every single year. The entire group of undrafted free agents that are on this roster right now are Taylor Elgersma, Emmanuel Wilson, Amar Johnson, Jalen White, Malik Heath, Julian Hicks, Sam Brown Jr., Messiah Swinson, Kadeem Telfort, Tyler Cooper, Donovan Jennings, Brant Banks, JJ Lippy, Bretton Cox, Nasir Stackhouse, James Esther, Jamon Johnson, Tyron Herring, Jonathan Baldwin, Kazir Brown, and Alex Hale. That's your group of undrafted free agents. Again, 21 players on the roster, 21 out of 90, 23.3%. This is an interesting group to look at for a variety of reasons. First of all, again, a huge chunk of the team, almost a quarter of the entire team are on undrafted free agents that they acquired. One just real quick aside, Messiah Swinson is a little bit of an interesting dynamic here where he was a player that was added via undrafted free agency, then put on the practice squad. Then the Carolina Panthers signed him off the practice squad and then released him. And then the Packers acquired him as basically like a street free agent. So you could put him sort of in the street free agency group because That's where he was most recently acquired, but I'm still putting him here in the undrafted free agency because that's where he was initially acquired. So that's a very interesting one, but I'm still putting him in this group. So 21 out of 90. What's maybe more interesting is that there's really maybe 4 players that have what seems like on the surface a legitimate chance to make this 53-man roster. It's maybe a little bit more than that, but the main ones here are Emmanuel Wilson at running back, Kadeem Telfort on the offensive line, who made the 53 last year. Of course, Wilson did as well. Brenton Cox, a defensive end who made the 53 last year and will have a really good chance to make it again this year. And then you've got a couple like Nasir Stackhouse could potentially make it as a defensive tackle. Malik Heath potentially as a number 6 wide receiver. Maybe Jamon Johnson as a linebacker. But that's probably it. A lot of practice squad guys. Maybe El Gersma could get the number 3 quarterback job on the active roster if he goes and tears it up. But for the most part, there doesn't seem to be a ton of opportunity for undrafted of like this entire group to make the 53. So 21 out of 90 right now, but you could end up in a world where maybe 2 or 3 of these guys actually make the 53. And I do kind of wonder overall if, despite Green Bay's tremendous success with undrafted free agents over the past, however many years, where they continue to have a player on the roster every single year, I do wonder if this is also a little bit of an area of opportunity. And what I mean by that is there are teams that will spend pretty aggressively in undrafted free agency and really treat it as almost another tier of maybe not free agency, but almost like a 8th round of the draft, and go out and spend and get guys that they thought they had really high draftable grades on to get them on the team and have a real opportunity to make the roster. Now, there is a downside in that. If you're going to give some big time signing bonus money to undrafted free agents and they don't make the team, if all of a sudden you gave out, $2 million in signing bonuses to UDFAs, and even if 1 or 2 makes the team, you still have a pretty significant amount of dead cap hit for all the ones that maybe didn't make the roster. Or you're just guaranteeing more. And if they don't make the team throughout the course of the year, meaning they get cut at some point, you're still taking some pretty big dead cap hit overall. It may not seem like that much, but, and quite frankly, I lie on that side of things. I would be more aggressive in this. Maybe you're not, maybe you do lose some money year over year and you're investing in some players that don't have a unbelievable chance to make the roster. But I do wonder if there is, again, just a little bit more opportunity to go a little bit more, I say big game hunting. There's only so much big game that can be found in undrafted free agency, but just being a bit more aggressive, guaranteeing some more contracts or guaranteeing some more money within those contracts, some big time signing bonuses, just to maybe attract some of the bigger name UDFAs. To their defense, they did that a little bit more this year. Nasir Stackhouse, Jamon Johnson, Tyler Cooper were just a few of those. And then, of course, Jonathan Baldwin as well. They did spend some pretty big signing bonus money on some UDFAs this year. So I think that's a little bit different, and I do really appreciate that. But overall, I look at the UDFAs on this roster, and while it makes up, again, 23% of the team over it, I do actually wonder if there's more opportunity to make this even a more competitive group by actually going out and spending a little bit more in undrafted free agency. So again, that group of players: El Gersma, Emmanuel Wilson, Amar Johnson, Jalen White, Malik Heath, Julian Hicks, Sam Brown Jr., Messiah Swinson, Kadeem Telfort, Tyler Cooper, Donovan Jennings, Brant Banks, JJ Lippy, Brenton Cox, Nasir Stackhouse, James Esther, Jamon Johnson, Tyron Herring, Jonathan Baldwin, Kazir Brown, and Alex Hale. What I will say is I would be willing to bet you there's a really big chunk of the practice squad that is made up of those 21 players. Next up, 13 out of 90 players, 14.4% of the entire roster are made up of street free agents. This group consists of Chris Brooks, the running back, Cornelius Johnson, Johnny Lumpkin, Trey Hill, Deslin Alexander, Nesta Jade Silvera, Keith Randolph, Isaiah Dunn, Gregory Jr., Kamal Haddon, Omar Brown, Daniel Whalen, and Brandon McManus. Let's start by saying thank goodness for the end of this list. It was getting pretty ugly for a little bit, and then you had Kamal Haddon, Omar Brown, Daniel Whalen, and Brandon McManus, which sort of made it a little bit better. And of course, you had Chris Brooks at the onset of it as well. The 4 big ones here are probably Chris Brooks, Kamal Haddon, Daniel Whalen, and Brandon McManus. And to be fair, even if it's just Daniel Whalen and Brandon McManus, that's a pretty significant piece of this roster when you consider that your punter and your kicker came to the team via street free agency. Chris Brooks was also an incredible pickup this past year. all things considered, right? I'm not saying Chris Brooks is one of the unbelievable dynamic players on this team, but to find a player like him just chilling out there, not even on a roster, able to be signed and picking him up and then quickly realizing that, oh, this kid can play and putting him on the 53, that was a really smart signing. And then Kamal Hadden, a 6th-round pick a year ago that's chilling in, out there, not signed by anyone, and the ability for Green Bay to bring him in as a practice squad player and now have him really legitimately competing, I think, for a 53-man roster spot. And Keyshawn Nixon was very complimentary of Kamal Hadden so far this offseason. I think they have something potentially there as well. So the key ones here, Chris Brooks, Kamal Hadden, Daniel Whelan, and Brandon McManus. And those are 4 that have a real legitimate chance to make the team. I'm not sure anyone out of Cornelius Johnson, Johnny Lumpkin, Trey Hill, Deslin Alexander, Nesta Jade Silvera, Keith Randolph, Isaiah Dunn, Gregory Jr., maybe Omar Brown has a chance, but outside of that, I don't think any of the other ones have a real chance to make the 53. And I think there's even probably limited practice squad guys here. So this group as a whole is not super impressive, but the fact, again, that there are just guys chilling in free agency at any given moment that they can find, and guys like Brandon McManus, Daniel Whelan, Chris Brooks, and Kamal Hadden are out there available and they found them, I think is still pretty impressive overall. What I will say here is almost 38% of the team, over a third of the team, are made up of these UDFAs and street free agents. And there's not a ton of big time prospects here, right? Maybe Brenton Cox or Emmanuel Wilson, Chris Brooks, Kamal Hadden turn into something. Daniel Whelan and Brandon McManus, of course, very important for the special teams. But almost 38% of the team are from these two groups. But what I will say is there's a real world in which maybe like 7 of these players make it actually to the 53. So while it's 38% right now, if it's 7 out of the 53 that are actually on the active roster, that's a little over 13%, which feels a little bit more right. And to be fair, it may not even be 7. Emmanuel Wilson is going to have to fight for that number 3 or number 4 running back spot. Kadeem Telford is not a lock to make the offensive line. Brenton Cox is going to have to battle it out to be that number 5 or 6 defensive end, probably battling with Kingsley Nigbari unless they keep 6, in which case he probably makes it. Nasir Stackhouse, again, probably going to have to compete, maybe even with fellow Georgia player and 6th-round pick Warren Brinson, and Brinson's going to have a lot of advantages there. Again, Chris Brooks, it might end up being Chris Brooks or Emmanuel Wilson. Kamal Hadden is no lock to make it at corner, and then Daniel Whelan and Brandon McManus McManus we know is a lock. Whelan, it feels like a lock right now and probably is. So those two are probably pretty safe at the moment, and certainly McManus is. But outside of that, there's no real locks or guarantees here other than Brooks or Emmanuel Wilson should make it. But again, even if it's 7 out of 53, that bumps it from about 38% of the team making up the roster to just 13% of the team. If again, 7 out of 53 are actually on that 53-man roster. All right, next up, 9 out of 90, 10% exactly, are 2 different groups. The first one is first-round draft picks, which is a good thing, right? You want a decent chunk of your team to be made up of first-round draft picks. And again, in this case, 10% of the roster is. That group consists of Jordan Love, Matthew Golden, Jordan Morgan, Rashawn Gary, Kenny Clark, Devontae Wyatt, LVN, Quay Walker, and Jair Alexander. Noteworthy here is that Kenny Clark, the lone remaining Ted Thompson player on this entire roster, which is still pretty incredible that he is still playing and that Ted Thompson still has his impact and fingerprints on this 90-man roster. But as far as this 9-player group goes, we have talked about, and I think it's very fair to say that some of the more recent first-round picks still leave enough to be desired. I don't know if it's a lot, but you would like a little bit more impact. Jordan Morgan, TBD. We don't know what's there yet. LVN has not performed up to expectations. Quay Walker showed signs, but overall through the course of his career has not lived up to it. Devontae Wyatt, same thing. These are players, and then of course some of the ones like Darnell Savage and Eric Stokes that are gone. These are players that, again, you would like a little bit better ROI from. Jair Alexander, there's no guarantee that he's on the team. And then, we still look at Kenny Clark, Rashawn Gary, Jordan Love, and then Matthew Golden as being pretty key pieces of this team at the moment. And I think that's an important way to look at this. Despite the fact that maybe you have a little bit higher desire for what these first round picks could have been, you still have your franchise quarterback, your new big time wide receiver toy in Matthew Golden, a potential starting offensive tackle in Jordan Morgan, your best defensive lineman, or at least best defensive end in Rashawn Gary, your best defensive tackle in Kenny Clark, your other starting defensive tackle in Devontae Wyatt, likely your other starting defensive end in LVN, your starting inside linebacker in Quay Walker, and as of now, at least, your starting corner in Jair Alexander. That is still a huge piece of the core of this team right now. So would you like maybe a little bit better? Sure. You could maybe make some arguments there, at least as of late, with some of the more recent first round picks. But still, a huge chunk of this team and a huge part of this team's identity is made up of those 9 first round picks. So area of opportunity and areas to even improve and get better with those first round picks, maybe? Sure. But again, a huge, huge part of the core of this team. The other 9, or another group of 9, again, 10% of the team, 9 out of 90, is in free agency. That group is Josh Jacobs, Mecole Hardman, Aaron Banks, Isaiah Simmons, Christian Welch, Keyshawn Nixon, Nate Hobbs, Xavier McKinney, and Matt Orzech. It's a pretty significant group. Obviously, the heartbeat of the team on offense this past year, and Josh Jacobs. Mecole Hardman's an interesting player at wide receiver / punt returner. Aaron Banks is your starting left guard. Isaiah Simmons should be a core special teamer plus backup linebacker. Christian Welch will have to fight his way onto the 53 as a special teams linebacker that can fill in a pinch. Maybe that number 6 guy. He'll have a chance. Don't think it's super likely, but he'll definitely have a chance. Keyshawn Nixon is your starting outside corner. Nate Hobbs is a starting corner, whether outside or inside. Xavier McKinney is a stud at safety, and Matt Orzech is your core long snapper. That's a pretty good group of free agents, all things considered, and specifically in Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney. Listen, when you go and spend a big chunk of money in free agency, you have to get those things right. It is such a massive disappointment, and it just makes it really difficult to overcome a big-time failure in free agency when you go out and spend big money. Joe Johnson, the former defensive end that the Packers signed from the Saints, was such a key example of that. There have been others as well, of course, but he is sort of the poster child. And if you go out and spend that big money and don't get your return on investment, it really sets the franchise back. And when you're going to go and spend it, you better get it right. And, Martellus Bennett was an example when they didn't. Jimmy Graham was an example of when they didn't. Again, Joe Johnson. And it just really makes it difficult to compete at the highest of levels because you're spending big money on a player that's not getting you what they should be getting you, and just is a key piece of your spending, but not a key piece of what is actually making your team successful. Just makes it tough. So the fact that they go out and spend big money on Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney and get unbelievable return on investment out of both of those, it's huge. And hopefully the same can be said this year for Aaron Banks as well as Nate Hobbs. And then finding some of those value players as well. Keyshawn Nixon is a huge example of that. Heck, even the contract that he's on now, which was a pretty solid contract extension at almost over $7 million per year, now still looks like a complete steal as he is a starting outside corner. And then getting some of those small ones right, like a Matt Orzech becoming your long snapper. Isaiah Simmons looks like he can be a core special teamer. Mecole Hardman might have the ability to win the punt return job and be that sixth receiver if Green Bay wants to keep him. Just some key pieces. And again, I think the pro personnel department has done a wonderful job finding free agents big, finding free agents small, and everything in between to fill out this roster. And there's a world in which all 9 of these players make the 53. Again, in Jacobs, Hardman, Banks, Simmons, Welch, Nixon, Hobbs, McKinney, and Orzech. Welch is going to be the tough one, and Hardman's not a guarantee, but at minimum, you get 7 of these players on the 53-man roster.
Hey friends, I'm so excited to tell you about this new game-changing product that I've been using before a big night out. It's called Pre-Alcohol. Now, ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Prebiotic Drink is the world's first genetically engineered prebiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's a buildup of that byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for rough days after drinking. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down, so just remember to make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night, to drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Now listen, I get it. I was a bit skeptical about pre-alcohol initially myself, but I've now used it for a bachelor party, the college basketball tournament, and recently for a friend's epic 40th birthday party, and I'm telling you, it's the real deal. And guess what? Summer is here, which means more opportunities to celebrate the warm weather. And before that backyard barbecue brew, the glass of Pinot watching the sunset at the beach, or a cocktail by the campfire, do not forget your ZBiotics pre-alcohol. Drink one before drinking and wake up feeling great and ready to take on the next day and all that summer has to offer. So go to zbiotics.com/packaday to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use code PACKADAY. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/packaday and use code PACKADAY at checkout for 15% off. Make sure to support our sponsors and use that code PACKADAY.
Next up, making up 7.8% of the team, 7 out of the 90 players are second round picks. Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Luke Musgrave, Elton Jenkins, Anthony Belton, Edgerrin Cooper, and Javon Bullard. I think my takeaway here is just like, what unbelievable talent that this group possesses. I don't think any of us at this point in time know what the outcome is for these 7, but I think the ceiling is just so incredibly high, but there is some volatility within it. The only player in this group that I think we have, that we know we have a feel on, is Elton Jenkins. We know what Elton is. Hopefully he can even be a better center this upcoming year, but Elton is Elton, right? We don't need to debate or kind of figure out what that is. But Jaden Reed, we've seen some unbelievable play from, but the second half of last season hit a little bit of a wall. Christian Watson is one of the most talented players on the entire team, but coming off an ACL, MCL, and just has not been able to stay healthy through the entirety of his contract so far, or his rookie contract. Luke Musgrave, kind of the same thing, right? One of the most talented players on the team, but has been beat up both of the first 2 seasons of his career, has not been able to stay healthy or on the field, and finished with just 7 catches a year ago. Again, we talked about Elton Jenkins. He's a stud. Anthony Belton, height, weight, speed, behemoth of an offensive lineman, plus has unbelievable movement skills. We have no idea what he's going to become. Good, bad, ugly, and different. Edgerrin Cooper looks like a superstar in the making. Still a little bit of volatility there, but unbelievable upside. And then Javon Bullard, who I think is, again, being a little bit overlooked and being, again, kind of dragged down a little bit by a couple poor performances this past year, where there was still some really good stuff on tape a year ago. And I remain incredibly excited about his future. And I still think he can be a stud in this league. Just talent upon talent upon talent upon talent. The ceiling is, like I said, huge. Like all of these guys, Jaden Reed could be a core player on a Super Bowl team. Christian Watson, again, is one of the most talented players on this entire team. Same thing for Musgrave. Jenkins is a stud. Belton, I think, has every right to be a legitimate, really good starting offensive lineman. Edgerrin Cooper, I think, can be a top 3, if not better, linebacker in this league. And Javon Bullard has every right to be a legitimately really good starting safety. I love this group of players. And I think you could make an argument that the outcome of these 7 goes so far in defining like what this Super Bowl window could be. If there is a legitimate high-end Super Bowl window, if Reed, Watson, Musgrave, Jenkins, Belton, Cooper, and Bullard like hit their ceilings here, you're talking about a totally different team. And if guys like Watson just can't get healthy or doesn't come back the same way, if Musgrave doesn't hit and he just ends up being a fine but unspectacular number 2 tight end that catches a few passes here and there, if Belton's a bust, if Bullard doesn't turn out, if Cooper doesn't make that step into superstardom, then it's a whole lot different. Then it's going to be really difficult. So I think you could make a huge argument that this group of 7 players is a pretty big swing one way or the other on the pendulum of whether this team is a big time contender or not. Next up, 6 out of 90, 6.7% of this team are 5th round picks. This is an interesting group. Sean Clifford, Dontavian Wicks, Jacob Monk, Kingsley Enagbare, Colin Oliver, and Kitano Ladapo. Like I said, just an interesting group, right? Sean Clifford probably doesn't make the 53, if we're being honest. And then we'll have a chance to make it as the practice squad quarterback again. Dontavian Wicks, the ultimate mystery box, could become a legitimate big time wide receiver. Could be that he's in the doghouse all year and is barely playing at all because he can't catch the ball. And the wide range of outcomes for Wicks is maybe one of the most compelling scenarios and situations of any player on this entire team. Jacob Monk rotating in with the ones right now because of Elton Jenkins' absence. You could tell me that he's one of the 8 offensive linemen active on game days, and I would totally believe it. You could tell me that he doesn't make the 53, and I would totally believe it. Kingsley Enagbare, we've talked about. You could tell me that he's the starting defensive end opposite Rashawn Gary. You could tell me that he doesn't make the team, and I would believe it. Colin Oliver will almost surely make the team this year no matter what. But you could, again, tell me that he is a really unique and special pass rush specialist with some ability to play some off-ball linebacker and just a very unique piece. Or you could tell me that he's just a special teams guy. He'll last a few years in the league and then kind of flame out from there. And I would believe that. And Katana Ladapo, I really, really like, but he's kind of buried on a very deep safety depth chart right now in Green Bay. And how he kind of stays relevant and can kind of stay active and find a way onto the field, I'm not sure at the moment, but I really like the player and really excited to see what he can become. But this is quite the eccentric group of 5th round picks. And that's what you expect from the 5th round. But I don't know in how these players play, specifically Dontavian Wicks, and whether Monk and Enagbare make the team, and if Oliver and Katana Ladapo can give the team anything besides special teams play. I think those are the very interesting talking points with that group of 5th round picks. All right, next up, you have 3 groups that make up 5.6% of the team, 5 out of 90. We'll start with 3rd round picks. Marshawn Lloyd, Savion Williams, Tucker Kraft, Sean Ryan, and Tyron Hopper. Talk about, outside of Tucker Kraft, who we know is just a stud, talk about this unbelievable boomer bust group of players. Marshawn Lloyd, completely injured all of last year, looks like a real big time player on, training camp, and in preseason a year ago, even in a couple runs that he got in the regular season, looks like he has that explosive ability, but has to stay healthy, has had fumble issues in college, and is going to have to make it so that he is finding a way onto the team, and not onto the team, but onto the actual like game day roster, finding ways to make an impact and staying healthy. And if he can do that, I think he can be a big time player, but he's going to have to show that. But high highs, potentially some low lows, or just like, again, a huge variance on what he can become as a player in this league. Savion Williams, we could say we know that this is like maybe one of the bigger boomer bust players and just prospects on this entire team. The high end upside is as large and as big as anyone on this team, but he's going to have to catch the ball. He's going to have to become a more nuanced route runner, and they're going to have to find ways to get the ball in his hands if he wants to hit that high end ceiling. So he is a very boomer bust player. Tucker Kraft's a stud. We know that. But even within that, you could be talking about somebody who's a top 3 tight end, or is just somebody that's living in the world of like top 12 tight end, range. So there's still a big time high end, upside there and a little bit of variance. Sean Ryan is sort of one of these ultimate variance players, almost week in and week out. He had some of the best games along the offensive line this past year. Also had some ones that were like, oh my God, what is going on with Sean Ryan right now? So variance even week to week. And then Tyron Hopper, all the talent is there. Height, weight, speed, good athletic profile, thumper, can take on blocks, special teams guy, sideline to sideline speed. It's all there. It's just very raw and not put together. And some of the stuff in college that was an issue has remained sort of an issue in the NFL so far. And again, a very high-end variance here with probably not it paying off. And it probably just ends up being a 3rd round pick that leaves you a little bit more to be desired. But I am still very intrigued by Tyron Hopper. So a unbelievable high-end variance group. Again, outside of maybe Tucker Kraft, where we know what he is. But Marshawn Lloyd, Savion Williams, Sean Ryan, and Tyron Hopper, a really intriguing group of players. Next up, again, is another 5 out of 9, 5.6%, and that is 4th round picks. This is a pretty impressive group for the 4th round overall. Romeo Doubs, Zach Tom, Barron Sorrell, Colby Wooden, and Evan Williams. Let's just start with Zach Tom here. One of Brian Gutekunst's best free draft picks, period, end of story. Finding Zach Tom, one of the best offensive linemen in football in the 4th round, is as good as it gets. Adding a starting wide receiver in Romeo Doubs and what I think can be a real big time starting safety in Evan Williams is pretty incredible work. And then you add on top of that a 4th round defensive end in Barron Sorrell, who has every right to be a big time rotational player as soon as this season, and Colby Wooden, who looks like he's going to make the 53 again this year. And that is a really impressive group of 4th round picks. you really cannot ask for much more than that for 5 fourth-round picks that are on this team. Again, Romeo Doubs, Zach Tom, Barron Sorrell, Colby Wooden, and Evan Williams. Next up is 7th-round picks. Again, 5 out of 90, 5.6% of the team. Rasheed Walker, John Williams, Carrington Valentine, Micah Robinson, and Kalen King. Now, 3 of these players, John Williams, Micah Robinson, and Kalen King, we have no idea, right? We're going to have to see what they can become if they make the 53, if they're, end of training camp roster cut down casualties. All 3 of them have every right to make the team. I think John Williams has a really great chance to make it along the offensive line. I think Micah Robinson and Kalen King are both going to compete at corner, along with Kamal Haddon, who we talked about earlier. So those should be some really interesting battles. But you have a starting left tackle and a starting caliber corner in Carrington Valentine, and then, of course, Rasheed Walker being the offensive tackle that you got from this group. If John Williams and Micah Robinson and Kalen King all just don't make it, they don't make the cut, even all 3 of them sign with other teams somehow, it would still be a pretty successful 7th-round group just based on Rasheed Walker and Carrington Valentine alone. And hopefully Williams and Robinson and King can become something, but they've got some leeway already with finding 2 big-time players in Valentine and Rasheed Walker in the 7th round already. Next up, 4 out of 90, 4.4% of this team are 6th-round picks. This is a pretty underwhelming group. This is one of those that you look at and you're like, they probably need to do a little bit better job in the 6th round. Travis Glover, Carl Brooks, Warren Brinson, and Isaiah McDuffie. Now, these are 6th-round picks. Like 6th and 7th-round picks are just like throw a dart at the dartboard, right? So the fact that you have Carl Brooks, a legitimate rotational defensive lineman, Warren Brinson, who I really liked from his college tape, and I'm hoping that he can make an impact on this team. Isaiah McDuffie, likely a starting 4-3 off-ball linebacker, as well as a core special teamer. And then Travis Glover, kind of a lottery ticket offensive lineman who's got great size, great strength, great physicality, but is just incredibly raw. Like, I don't hate this as a group of 6th-round picks. You don't have like a big-time player here, although I do think Carl Brooks has the ability to be much better than he was a season ago. Just kind of an interesting group. There's a real chance that all 4 of these players make the 53. McDuffie is going to. Brooks is almost assuredly going to. Brinson's almost assuredly going to. The question mark maybe would be Travis Glover. But even like on the downside, you're almost certainly getting 3 out of 53. And you have a real chance at 4 out of 53. So it's not the sexiest group in the world, but again, all things considered, 6th-round picks, total crapshoots. Getting 4 out of 53 potentially here would be a good result. And hopefully guys, especially Carl Brooks, can step up and be a bigger player than he was a season ago, because I definitely think that potential is there. Next up, 3 out of 90 players on this roster, 3.3%, were acquired via waivers. Any idea who those 3 players were? 3 players that we haven't mentioned yet? 3, 2, 1. Did you get any of them? Ben Sims, Aaron Mosby, and Zane Anderson. Again, not the sexiest group of players, not the players that are going to make the make or break what's coming up this season. Ben Sims will fight for the number 3 tight end spot. Aaron Mosby maybe can get his name in that conversation for the number 6 defensive end spot, but he has work to do. There's 4 guys that are going nowhere in Colin Oliver, in LVN, Rashawn Gary, and Barron Sorrell. And then you still have Brenton Cox and Kingsley Enagbare after that. So trying to even make it as like the 6th guy is going to be insanely hard in and of itself. But he does have a chance at the practice squad, and he is a unique player that does give you a little bit as a defensive end, has played some off-ball linebacker in the past, and is a core special teamer as well. So there's a little something there, but it's going to be tough for him. And then Zane Anderson should make it as a core special teamer and backup safety. He got in a little bit. I think it was the Lions game last year where he got in and played some starting reps at safety and actually looked pretty darn well doing it, or pretty darn good doing it. And it's like I said, not the craziest group, not the one that's going to have a huge impact on the season overall. But you could be looking at least 2 of these players making the 53 in Sims and Anderson. But Sims is going to have to beat John Fitzpatrick out for that number 3 tight end spot. And Zane Anderson probably has to fight off Omar Brown for that number 5 safety spot. So yeah, interesting group. I think this is one where maybe Goody could be a little bit more aggressive in waivers, but nothing that I'm going to overly criticize him for as he's built this team out. 2 left, 2 out of 90, 2.2% were acquired via poaching other teams' practice squads. Those 2 players, Bo Melton and John Fitzpatrick, they picked up Bo Melton from the Seahawks practice squad, John Fitzpatrick from the Falcons practice squad. Fitzpatrick will have a real opportunity to make the team as the number 3 tight end. Bo Melton is going to have to fight tooth and nail with McCole Hardman and Malik Heath to try to make it just as the number 6 wide receiver, but we'll have a real chance to make the practice squad if he doesn't do that. Again, nothing that's going to change the outcome of this team, but 2 players that when you're just picking guys off of opposing teams' practice squads, it's about as good as you could, hope for. Alan Lazard, of course, the poster child for that from a Green Bay standpoint, but Rasul Douglas as well. But Bo Melton, John Fitzpatrick, the 2 that they have poached from other teams' practice squads. And last but not least, 1 player out of 90, 1.1%, were acquired via trade, and that, of course, was Malik Willis, an unbelievable deal for Green Bay last year, a late 7th-round pick for Malik Willis, a quarterback that comes in and wins 2 games as a starter, wins another game that he came in for, and then easily could have won that Chicago game. He drives the team down, gets the team into, the ability to get the game-winning points. It's not his fault that the defense let up that score at the end. So Malik Willis just performed unbelievably, admirably this past year, and very, very impressive transaction towards the end of the offseason last year, right before the start of the season, and paid huge dividends this past year. So that's another one where you could maybe look at it and say, hey, I wish Goody would be a little bit more aggressive in trading for players. I would agree with that, especially like just knowing Goody and knowing how he likes to trade via the draft, and just maybe swapping a little bit more. I know it's tough sometimes to find those values from other teams. Teams hold on to their players pretty tight, but that is one where maybe I'd like to see Goody just explore it a little bit more. So in totality, you have 21 out of your 90 players added via undrafted free agency, 13 out of 90 via street free agency. You had 9 out of 90 as first-round picks, 9 out of 90 on just regular free agency, 7 out of 90 as second-round picks, 6 out of 90 as fifth-round picks, 5 out of 90 as third, 5 out of 90 as fourth, and 5 out of 90 as seventh. 4 out of 90 are sixth-round picks. 3 out of 90 were acquired via waivers, 2 out of 90 via practice squad poaching, and 1 out of 90 via trade. That is how your current Green Bay Packers roster has been put together. Some areas of opportunity, certainly, but still a very well-rounded roster that has players that are going to make this team from all different avenues via trade, waivers, draft, undrafted free agency, unrestricted free agency, street free agency, and everything in between. I think Goody deserves credit overall for the 90-man roster that he's put together, and we'll see what that 53-man roster looks like before you know it, coming up here at the end of August, early September, as those roster cuts ultimately get made. It'll be here, trust me, before you know it. That's going to do it for me today. Shout out to our All-Pro and Hall of Fame members: Most Hated Minnesotan, PJ Wynn, John Wild, Brandon Paletta, Boom Handle, Donald Lee, Lori Lord, Baby QB, David McCluskey, Donald Decker, Alex Wong, Peter Ritaka, Jay Zimmerman, B. Brown, Puerto Rican Packer, Dan Gessfer, Dylan Patscott, SoCal Pack, Chris Rager, Izzy Roberts, Ian Ewing, Jake Koner, Carlo Delgado, Willie Winklestinkle, Jen Wright, The Gable Storm, Matt Geiger, and Pack Attack Cast. I'll see you guys tomorrow, but until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.